Ethan Carter woke up to a crushing weight on his chest. His eyes fluttered open, and in the dim glow of his bedside lamp, he saw a figure above him. Panic shot through his body. His arms jerked, trying to push the person away, but they held him down with surprising strength. His breath came in sharp gasps as he struggled, but the more he fought, the harder the grip became. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest. The figure leaned closer, and Ethan saw her face, his new housekeeper, Leora. Her dark eyes burned with urgency, her expression tense. Ethan opened his mouth to shout, but before he could, her hand clamped over his lips. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do not move." Ethan's mind raced. This had to be some kind of mistake. Was she attacking him? Was this a robbery? His pulse roared in his ears as he glared up at her, demanding answers with his eyes. Leora's grip on his shoulders tightened, her breathing quick and shallow. Then he heard it. A low, metallic screech outside his window. It was a strange, unnatural sound, like metal being twisted and torn apart. Ethan's body went rigid. His instincts screamed at him to look, to see what was making that noise, but Leora forced his head down. "Don't," she warned, her voice trembling. "They will know." Who? Ethan's mind spun with questions, but before he could react, the entire room seemed to shift. The walls trembled slightly, as if something massive had passed by. The sound of slow, heavy footsteps echoed in the silence, but they were unlike anything Ethan had ever heard before. They weren't human. Leora pressed her fingers over his mouth even harder. Her touch was ice cold, and her eyes darted to the window. A shadow moved across the thin curtains, stretching unnaturally long, distorting into something that did not belong to this world. Ethan's throat tightened. His body screamed for him to run, to get away, but Leora wouldn't let him go. Something outside let out a strange clicking sound, slow and rhythmic, like a message being whispered in a language he didn't understand. The shadow on the curtains flickered and twisted, then slowly disappeared. For a long moment, neither Ethan nor Leora moved. The only sound in the room was their rapid breathing. After what felt like an eternity, Leora finally released him and pulled back, but her body remained tense, ready to react. Ethan sucked in a deep breath, rubbing his chest where she had pinned him down. What the hell was that? He hissed, keeping his voice low. Leora didn't answer immediately. She moved cautiously, shifting her weight as she listened carefully to the silence outside. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes held something Ethan couldn't quite place. Fear, urgency, maybe even regret. "You were marked," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They were looking for you." Ethan's stomach twisted. Who is they? His voice was still hushed, but he could feel the panic rising. "What are you talking about?" Leora exhaled sharply and turned her gaze to him. "You need to leave this place. Now." Ethan let out a short, bitter laugh. "What? No, I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's going on." He swung his legs over the bed and reached for the lamp, but Leora grabbed his wrist before he could turn it on. "Don't," she warned. "Light will make it worse." Ethan yanked his hand back, frustration bubbling in his chest. "You break into my room, pin me down, and now you're acting like I'm in some kind of horror movie. I don't know what game you're playing, but A sharp noise cut him off. A tapping sound. Slow, deliberate. It came from the window. Ethan froze. His breath hitched as his eyes flicked toward the thin curtains. The tapping continued, steady and calculated. It was not the wind. It was not a branch. It was something else. Lyra's entire body tensed. She reached for something hidden under her sleeve, a small metallic device that gave off a faint blue glow. "Stay behind me," she murmured, barely moving her lips. Ethan's heartbeat pounded in his ears as the tapping stopped. Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then, without warning, the window glass rattled violently, as if something was testing its strength. Ethan shot to his feet. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, every muscle in his body tight with fear. Leora didn't answer. She held up the glowing device, her grip firm. The air in the room felt heavier, like an invisible force was pressing down on them. Ethan didn't believe in the supernatural, but at that moment, he wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The rattling stopped. A slow, raspy breath echoed from outside the window, long and unnatural. Ethan felt his skin crawl. He didn't dare move. He didn't dare breathe. Then, the shadow returned. It was larger this time, darker, stretching across the entire curtain like a stain on reality. The thing outside didn't move like a normal creature. It twisted and pulsed, its form shifting. Lyra took a cautious step forward, angling the glowing device toward the window. The moment the light hit the curtain, the shadow recoiled, retreating as if burned. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the air, and then, silence. Ethan's chest heaved as he stared at the window, his mind barely able to process what had just happened. His entire world had just flipped upside down. Leora turned to him, her face grim. "You don't have time to argue," she said, slipping the glowing device back into her sleeve. "They know you're here now." Ethan swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "Who are they? What do they want from me?" Leora hesitated, then finally spoke. "You are not just an ordinary human, Ethan. You never were. And now, they've come to take you." Ethan's stomach clenched. This was insane. This wasn't real. But the fear in Leora's eyes, the unexplainable presence outside his window, it was all too real. Before he could process any of it, the room suddenly plunged into darkness. The power went out. Then, from outside the house, a new sound echoed through the night. A voice, whispering in a language that was not human. Ethan's breath hitched as the whispers outside his window grew louder. They were not words he could understand, but the sound sent a chill down his spine. It was like a song, a rhythmic hum that felt unnatural, almost hypnotic. His fingers curled into fists as he fought the urge to move closer, to listen. Something deep inside him screamed that he shouldn't. Lyra didn't hesitate. She grabbed Ethan's wrist and yanked him away from the window. "We need to go. Now." Ethan pulled back. "Go where?" "I don't even know what's happening." His voice was still low, but frustration and fear burned in his chest. Lyra's eyes flashed with urgency. "They are inside the house." Ethan's breath caught. The air around him suddenly felt heavier, thicker, like an unseen force was pressing down on him. Then he heard it, the soft creak of the wooden floor in the hallway. His blood ran cold. That was impossible. He lived alone. Lyra tightened her grip on his wrist and pulled him toward the door. "No time to explain. You need to trust me." Ethan hesitated. His mind was still trying to catch up with everything happening. But deep down, something told him she was right. He gave one last glance at the window. The shadow was gone, but the feeling of something watching remained. Then another creak. Closer this time. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears as Leora quietly opened the door, peeking outside. The hallway was dark, the power still out, but something about the shadows felt wrong. They were too deep, too thick, like they weren't just darkness, but something alive. Leora turned to Ethan. "Stay close. No sudden moves." Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. They stepped into the hallway. The air was unnaturally cold, and the house felt different, like it wasn't his home anymore. Lyra moved ahead, her movements careful, calculated. Ethan followed, his muscles tense. Every step they took felt deafening in the silence. Then, a whisper, right behind them. Ethan spun around. Nothing. Just darkness stretching down the hall. His breathing quickened. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand, her fingers moving in a strange pattern. The blue glow from her device flickered to life, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Ethan watched as the darkness around them seemed to shift, pulling away from the light. A shape moved at the end of the hall. It wasn't human. Ethan's stomach twisted. The figure was tall, its limbs too long, its movements unnatural, like it was glitching through reality. Its head tilted slightly as if sensing them. Lyora took a slow step back. "Don't move." Ethan's entire body locked in place. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might give them away. The figure at the end of the hall let out a slow, shuddering breath, the sound filling the silence. Then it started moving toward them. Not walking, gliding. Ethan felt every muscle in his body scream to run, but Lyora held firm. The figure stopped just a few feet away. Ethan could see its face now. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin stretched too tight over its skull. Then suddenly, it twitched. A sharp clicking sound filled the air, echoing in Ethan's ears. His body jolted with a surge of instinctual terror. It was speaking. Lyora moved fast. She grabbed Ethan's arm and shoved him through a hidden door in the wall. They stumbled into darkness as the door sealed behind them. Ethan gasped, his hands gripping the cool, stone walls around him. What the hell was that? Lyora didn't answer right away. She pressed a hand against the door, listening. After a long, tense moment, she turned to him. "They are called the Silent Watchers, and they won't stop until they have you." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Why? What do they want from me?" Lyora's eyes darkened. "You're not who you think you are, Ethan. And now, they know it too." Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears as the narrow passage swallowed them in darkness. The only light came from Lyora's small glowing device, casting eerie shadows along the cold stone walls. His breath came in short, panicked gasps, his mind still struggling to catch up with everything that had just happened. The thing in the hallway, the way it moved, the way the shadows seemed to bend around it, it wasn't human. Lyora pressed her ear against the hidden door, listening. The silence on the other side was thick and suffocating. Ethan could almost feel something waiting just beyond the wall, lurking in the darkness. Lyora finally turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "They know you're awake now," she said softly. "That changes everything." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. I don't even know what's happening. What were those things? Why are they after me?" Lyora didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out and grabbed his wrist, pulling him deeper into the tunnel. "Keep moving," she whispered. "They'll search the house first, but they won't take long to realize where we've gone." Ethan hesitated. Why are you helping me? Who even are you?" Lyora's grip on his wrist tightened. "I was sent here to protect you." Ethan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Protect me? You pinned me down in my own bed and told me not to move. That's a weird way of protecting someone." Lyora stopped walking. She turned to face him, her expression serious. "If I hadn't held you down, you would have looked at them. And if you had looked, they would have taken you." Ethan's skin prickled. "Taken me where?" Lyora exhaled sharply. "Somewhere you wouldn't come back from." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to demand answers. But the truth was, deep down, he already knew this was real. Whatever those creatures were, whatever had been watching him, it wasn't human. And somehow he was connected to it. A metallic clanking sound echoed from behind them, followed by a slow, unnatural clicking noise. Lyora stiffened. "They've found the passage," she whispered. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Are you kidding me?" "How?" "They're not human," she said, pulling him forward. "They don't search with their eyes. They search with sound. And they've heard us." The air in the tunnel suddenly shifted, like something heavy had entered the space with them. The clicking grew louder, sharper, closer. Lyora grabbed Ethan's hand and ran. Ethan stumbled at first, nearly falling as his bare feet smacked against the cold floor. The tunnel twisted and turned, stretching out into endless darkness. but Leora seemed to know exactly where she was going. The clicking behind them grew frantic, a strange, high-pitched sound like bones snapping together. Ethan risked a glance back. He shouldn't have. Something was there. The shadows in the tunnel shifted, moving like living smoke, twisting into long, clawed hands that reached for them. Ethan's chest clenched with terror. The creature had no clear form, just a writhing mass of darkness, flickering in and out of existence like a glitch in reality. And it was getting closer. Leora yanked Ethan around another corner, nearly slamming him into the wall. "Keep running," she shouted. Ethan had no choice but to obey. His legs burned, his lungs ached, but the pure, raw terror pushing him forward wouldn't let him stop. Then, just as the clicking reached its highest, most piercing tone, Leora shoved him through a door. Ethan tumbled forward, hitting the ground hard. He scrambled up just in time to see Leora slam the door shut behind them. The moment it closed, a strange blue light surged through the walls, and the clicking outside suddenly stopped. Silence. Ethan sat on the cold ground, chest heaving, his entire body shaking. The adrenaline still surged through his veins, his mind barely processing the fact that he was alive. Leora leaned against the door, pressing a hand to her forehead. "That was too close," she muttered. Ethan forced himself to his feet. "You think?" He ran a hand through his hair, his fingers trembling. What was that thing? Why was it chasing us? Leora looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Because, Ethan, you're not supposed to be here." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean? This is my house. My life." No. Leora shook her head. "This life, this place, it was never meant for you. And now, the Watchers know." Ethan stared at her, his stomach twisting. His hands clenched into fists as fear and frustration boiled inside him. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Who am I?" Leora hesitated, then finally said, "You are the last of Earth's forgotten warriors. And now, the Watchers want what's inside you." Ethan's mind reeled as Leora's words echoed in his head. The last of Earth's forgotten warriors. That didn't make any sense. He wasn't a warrior. He was just an ordinary guy, living an ordinary life. He worked, paid his bills, and had no idea what any of this meant. But deep down, something about her words felt right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. A buried part of his mind stirred, as if it had been asleep for years. He took a shaky breath. "You're telling me I'm some kind of soldier, a warrior from Earth?" Leora nodded. "Not just a soldier, a weapon, and the Watchers have come to claim you." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his pulse still racing. "That's insane. I don't remember anything like that." Leora took a step closer. "Because you weren't supposed to." Ethan's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Leora hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You were hidden here, in this life. Your memories were erased, your past wiped clean. You were given a new identity, a normal life, so the Watchers would never find you." Ethan swallowed hard. "And yet, here they are." Leora's jaw clenched. "Because something woke you up, something inside you stirred, and they felt it." Ethan shook his head. This was too much. One moment, he was asleep in his bed. The next, his housekeeper was pinning him down. Monsters were invading his home. And now he was being told he was some kind of lost warrior. But the more he tried to deny it, the more he felt it was true. Something inside him had changed. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "All right, let's say I believe you. What do they want with me? Why are they after me?" Leora's face darkened. "Because inside you, buried deep within your mind, is something ancient, something powerful, a knowledge that was never meant to be found." Ethan frowned. "What kind of knowledge?" Leora hesitated again. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "The key to destroying them." A heavy silence fell between them. Ethan stared at her, his mind struggling to comprehend the weight of her words. He let out a shaky laugh. "You're telling me. I have something in my head that can destroy those things. I don't even remember how to fight. I'm just a regular guy." Leora grabbed his arm. "No, you're not. You've just been made to believe that. Your instincts, your training, it's all still inside you, buried deep. And now, the Watchers will do whatever it takes to make sure you never remember it." Ethan's stomach twisted. He didn't want to believe her. He wanted to wake up in his bed, go back to his normal life. But normal was gone. He had felt it the moment the shadows moved. The moment the Watchers spoke in their eerie, clicking whispers. Something inside him recognized them. Something inside him knew them. His hands clenched into fists. "If they want me dead, why haven't they just killed me already?" Lyra's expression was grim. "Because they don't just want to kill you. They want to take you, to bring you back to them. And once they do..." She trailed off, her gaze flickering to the door they had barely escaped through. Ethan swallowed hard. "What happens if they take me?" Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "Then, Ethan, the war will be over, and humanity will lose." A cold chill ran through Ethan's body. He wasn't just running for his own survival. He was running for something much bigger. Before he could respond, a loud, inhuman screech echoed through the tunnels, shaking the very walls around them. The Watchers had found them. Leora grabbed his arm. "No more questions. Run." Ethan didn't hesitate. The moment Leora pulled him forward, he ran. His legs burned, his chest ached, but the primal fear pushing him forward wouldn't let him stop. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, twisting and turning through the darkness. Behind them, the walls trembled with the eerie screeches of the Watchers. The clicking sounds were getting closer. Ethan risked a glance back and immediately regretted it. The shadows behind them moved, shifting like liquid, stretching unnaturally as if the tunnel itself was warping. Then something emerged, a tall, grotesque figure, its body flickering in and out of reality, like a broken image on a corrupted screen. Its face was still blank, just smooth, pale skin with no features. But its head twitched, snapping from side to side in quick, unnatural movements. And then it ran. Ethan's stomach dropped. The creature didn't move like a human. It glided forward, covering impossible distances in seconds. The air around it shimmered, bending like heat waves. It was too fast. "We won't outrun it," Ethan shouted. Leora didn't answer. She suddenly yanked him sideways into a smaller tunnel, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. Ethan nearly lost his balance as they stumbled forward. Behind them, the Watcher let out an ear-splitting screech, its clicking language turning frantic. Then it followed. Ethan's heart pounded. The tunnel was too tight, too narrow. If that thing caught up. "Keep going," Leora urged, her voice sharp. Ethan pushed forward, his breath sagged. The walls of the tunnel pulsed with an eerie blue glow, ancient symbols flickering across the stone like warnings. He had no idea where they were, but he had a sickening feeling that this place wasn't meant for him. A metallic grinding noise echoed from behind them. Ethan didn't look. He didn't need to. He could feel the Watcher closing in. Then, just as Ethan was sure they were out of options, Leora suddenly pressed her hand against the tunnel wall. A series of glowing blue symbols flared to life, pulsing under her palm. The moment her hand touched the stone, a hidden door slid open. Without hesitation, she shoved Ethan through. He stumbled forward into a massive chamber, nearly collapsing onto the cold floor. Lyra jumped in right behind him, slamming the door shut with a loud thud. The moment the door sealed, the walls hummed with energy. The Watcher on the other side let out a guttural, distorted screech, so loud that Ethan had to clap his hands over his ears. Then, silence. Ethan stayed on the ground, gasping for breath. His entire body trembled. Every muscle ached. He could still feel the weight of the Watcher's presence, just beyond the wall. Slowly, he turned to Leora. What the hell was that? Leora pressed her back against the wall, catching her breath. A safe zone. They can't enter here. Ethan frowned. Why not? She pointed to the glowing symbols on the walls. This place was built before them, before Earth fell. It's one of the last remnants of the war. Ethan's chest tightened. The war? Leora nodded. The war you fought in. Ethan exhaled shakily. His mind still screamed at him to deny it, to call her a liar, to say this was impossible. But the deeper they went, the more they ran, the more it all felt familiar. He looked around you said, walls, glowing faintly with an energy Ethan didn't understand but somehow recognized. Massive stone pillars stretched high above them, their surfaces etched with markings that felt both ancient and futuristic. The air itself seemed to hum, filled with a strange presence, as if the very room was alive. Ethan placed a hand on one of the pillars. The moment his skin touched the cold stone, a sudden wave of memories crashed over him. Flashes. A battlefield, burning under an alien sky. Soldiers, not human, fighting beside him. Their strange armor glowing with the same blue light as the markings around him. The Watchers, taller, darker, consuming everything in their path. And him, standing at the center, holding a weapon unlike anything he had ever seen before. His body jolted back, his breathing ragged. He knew this place. He had been here before. Lyra watched him carefully. You're remembering, aren't you? Ethan swallowed hard. His head pounded, his mind racing. I don't know, he admitted. It's like my brain is glitching. I see things, but I don't understand them. Leora stepped closer. Your memories were buried deep for a reason. But this place, it's waking them up. Ethan ran a shaky hand through his hair. What was I? Who was I? Leora hesitated before answering. Then she said, you were the last line of defense, the final warrior of Earth's resistance. When the war was lost, when humanity was erased, they hid you away. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Erased. You're lying, he whispered. Humanity's still out there. Earth still exists. Lyora's eyes darkened. The Earth you remember. The people. The life you had. It was all fabricated. The real Earth fell a long time ago. Ethan's breath caught. He wanted to deny it, to tell her she was insane. But deep down, he knew something was wrong with his life. The strange gaps in his past. The eerie, dreamlike quality of his memories. The feeling that he was living someone else's story. It wasn't real. None of it was real. Leora stepped forward, her voice softer now. I was sent to wake you up before they could take you. The Watchers don't want to kill you, Ethan. They want to use you. If they get inside your mind, they can rewrite history itself. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. Rewrite history. How? Leora hesitated, because buried inside your memories is the one thing they fear most, the key to undoing them. Ethan's breath hitched. Undoing them. Leora nodded. They weren't always in control. Once, we were the ones winning. You were leading us. But something happened, something so catastrophic that history itself was rewritten. Now, they are the only ones who remember what truly happened. Ethan felt his head spin. If what she was saying was true, then his entire existence had been nothing but a carefully crafted lie. His fists clenched. So, what do we do? Leora took a deep breath. We find the last piece of your memory. The one thing they never wanted you to see. Ethan exhaled slowly, the weight of the truth settling over him. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't sure he would ever be. But one thing was clear now. The life he had was never real. And the war wasn't over yet. Ethan stared at the glowing symbols on the walls, his heart pounding. The truth weighed heavily on him, pressing down like an unbearable force. Everything he thought he knew, his life, his memories, his identity, was nothing but a carefully crafted illusion. A lie designed to keep him hidden, But why? Why go through so much effort just to bury one man's past? Leora watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. "You're feeling it now, aren't you?" she said quietly. "The memories, the truth pulling at the edges of your mind." Ethan took a deep breath. He could feel something, like an itch in the back of his skull, something just out of reach, a memory they didn't erase properly. He clenched his fists. "You said the Watchers want me alive," he muttered, "that they need me for something. But if I'm really as dangerous as you say, why not just kill me?" Leora exhaled, her gaze darkening. "Because they can't." Ethan's stomach twisted. "What do you mean, they can't?" She hesitated for a moment, then said, "You are the last remnant of the old war, the final piece of what was lost. And inside you, inside your mind, there is something the Watchers cannot destroy." Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Lyra's eyes locked onto his. "The code." A sharp pain stabbed through Ethan's skull. The moment she said those words, a flood of static rushed through his mind. Images, voices, pieces of something ancient and powerful, buried deep within him. He stumbled backward, gripping his head. The code. The phrase itself meant something, but the meaning was just out of reach. Lyra grabbed his arm, steadying him. "Ethan, listen to me. You were once part of the last rebellion, a war against the Watchers that ended in disaster. When they took control, they erased history, rewrote it in their own image. But before the fall, before the last battle was lost, our people hit a failsafe, a way to undo what was done." Ethan's pulse pounded. "And that's inside my head." She nodded. "It's buried in your subconscious, locked away, waiting to be retrieved. The Watchers have spent centuries trying to extract it, but they can't force it out of you. That's why they let you live in their fabricated world, hoping you would wake up on your own." Ethan swallowed hard. "And if they get to me first?" Lyra's expression was grim. "Then they will rewrite the last piece of history, and this time, there will be no coming back." A deep, distant rumbling filled the chamber. The symbols on the walls flickered, their glow weakening. Lyra's eyes widened. "They found us." Ethan turned, his chest tightening. The Watchers were coming. He didn't need to see them to feel them. Their presence was suffocating, pressing in from all sides. Leora grabbed his hand. "There's no more time." She pulled him toward the far end of the chamber, where a massive stone doorway stood covered in more of the glowing runes. "We have to finish what we started. We have to unlock your mind. Now." Ethan hesitated. He knew the moment he stepped through that door, there would be no turning back. No more pretending. No more normal life. But then he thought about the Watchers, about the war they had erased, about the countless lives lost to a history no one even remembered. He took a breath. His decision was made. "Let's end this," he said. Leora nodded, then stepped through the door. "Ethan." The chamber trembled as the Watchers closed in. The symbols around them flickered, their light nearly extinguished. Ethan took one last look behind him. Then, with a steady breath, he stepped forward, into the unknown.